think have almost everybody in. Okay, hello everybody. We're going to get started. I'm Mindy Wilson. I'm in the Center for Career and Professional Development, and you are in the Consulting Mini Career Chat, and we're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about consulting careers. If you are a student in the session, please make sure that your audio is muted so that we can hear our speakers. We have three alumni with us today. We have Pete Eddings. He's class of 2015, is that correct?
That's right.
Wow, that's not very long ago. He's a human resources consultant at Mercer. We have Troy Edelen, he's class of 89, and he's a business transformation consultant at Asbury Consulting. And we have Mary Walter Arthur, class of 77, and she's a senior HR consultant at Brighter Strategies.
She's so old, long ago. Jeez.
You are not the most mature alum speaking at our mini career chats, if it makes you feel any better.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we'll just call you very experienced. So we're going to go ahead and start with Pete and go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Mindy. As Mindy mentioned, I'm class of 2015, so I've been out of center for a little over 5 years now. Time flies, I feel like I was just there. But I'm just going to give a quick overview of my time at center and kind of the decisions and path that I made kind of led me where I am today. So I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and I work in Louisville, Kentucky today. I went to center and ultimately double majored in math and financial economics, which was a decision in and of itself I had to make that wasn't totally clear to me when I first went into college. I actually thought I wanted to major in history. But I've always been pretty good at math and took calculus 3 and just kind of looked up when it was time to declare a major and was like, I like math and I'm good at math, but I don't really know what I can do with it. But I figured I would figure that out, and I did some research. And one of the big themes I'm going to talk about today is figuring out what even jobs are out there. Because that was when I was in your all's shoes, I didn't know what there was. So I majored in math. I ended up picking up a double major in financial economics. I studied abroad in Reading, England, which was one of the independent type studies where you actually enrolled at the university. I feel like that was like a true study abroad experience, not that like the London or Strasbourg program was, but I liked having that independence. The major, I think, thing that I did at center that led me to where I am today was while I was studying abroad, I got an email from somebody at Mercer that was taking a campus recruiting visit to talk about Mercer. And I was abroad out of the country, but I saw the email and I'd previously done some research on what kind of jobs are out there for math and econ majors. And consulting was on there, and specifically Mercer was listed as a top company to work for. So that email caught my eye. I ended up reaching out, interviewing, took an internship between my summer of junior and senior year, loved it, had an awesome experience, got an offer full-time when I graduated, and I've been there ever since. So it's been a little over 5 years now. Kind of the big experience I had was I had the opportunity to move from Louisville, Kentucky out to Los Angeles, California for a year and then come back. So that's kind of my background. Mercer specifically as a consulting firm focuses on human resources. So the people that companies have. And I think that's really interesting because that's really, no matter what type of company you work for, they're going to hire employees, and it's really driving, some of the business strategies. So companies will hire us to give them expert advice on what to pay their employees, what kind of benefits to provide, what kind of career paths do you have. So the biggest thing I like about my job is even if I completely left the industry and worked for somewhere else, I'm still going to get paid. I'm still going to require benefits, health insurance, retirement. I'm going to want to have some sort of career mobility. I don't want to just stay in the same job forever. So getting that experience and learning about all those different factors while being able to help other companies apply it to their employees is particularly gratifying for me. So Troy, I guess I'll hand it over to you.
Sure, appreciate that, Pete. So I'm gonna, it's been 30 years since my center days, so I'm gonna focus a little bit more on the path and really kind of make the point that it's not necessarily going to be a direct path to consulting, which mine was definitely not, and was not intentional when I left Center in 1989. So when I was looking for work, I interviewed with a bank that's no longer around called Liberty National at Center. A former Center alum worked in their recruiting group, the learning development group. So we interviewed, I got that position. So I started in their retail management training program, worked my way up to branch manager. That bank, now they're part of Bank One, Capital One, I believe, eventually. After 5 years, decided I want to move to the next step. So I went to Notre Dame, got my MBA at Notre Dame with a concentration in marketing, because I was going to go into marketing at this point. I was going to do something totally different from banking. Well, when I got out of Notre Dame, I realized that the marketing firms really were only going to hire me at an entry level. And that just wasn't where I wanted to be at that point in my career. So I ended up, through a Notre Dame alum, getting introduced to Wachovia Bank, another bank that's not there anymore, to their recruiting group. They actually, Wachovia Bank, which is now part of Wells Fargo, had just started a large program to reassess their distribution strategy, their branches and ATMs. They had engaged McKinsey Consulting to do this work, but they needed client staff to team up with McKinsey consultants to build the models and then run the program throughout their entire 3-state network at the time. So went to North Carolina, joined Wachovia. We did that project for about 9-12 months or so. Realized it was not going to be just a once and done project. So I was asked to lead the team to actually continuously analyze the network. We grew that to 13 people, 3 different groups. But then I kind of reflect back once I got settled down into Winston-Salem, North Carolina, that really wasn't the place I wanted to be in, at that point in my career or in my life, really. So I went along one light, looked at the consulting firms because I really liked that part of the job, the project part of it. PwC was hiring in San Francisco. I submitted my resume one night. They called me the next day. I flew out for an interview, and about a month later, I came to San Francisco, and that was 20 years ago in 2000, to join PwC's financial services practice. I was with them for about 2.5, 3 years. This was now 2002. There was a big independence issues with consulting and audit firms. So we had to fix that. So PwC sold their consulting practice to IBM. I was laid off at that point because IBM really just wanted the clients, and thought that was kind of my time in consulting. But actually, a previous client brought the team back to do phase 2 of a piece of work, and now my friends at IBM hired me as an independent consultant to come work with them on that phase 2. That was 18 years ago. And since then, I've just pieced together projects and have now formed my own consulting firm, Spirit Consulting, still out here in San Francisco. Although because of that work, I've pretty much worked almost in every state in the US over the years. I've had a chance to work in Hong Kong, Istanbul, Warsaw, Prague, London, and all throughout the US. So it's been a great experience. But I guess the moral to my story is it won't necessarily be a straight line. So, if consulting really is something that you're interested in, it may not be the first, stop, but it's something that you can get into later. And it's something I think that Mindy mentioned. It may not be the first, job out of college, but, I joined as an experienced hire at PwC. And that's what really launched my career into consulting. So that's kind of the path of many, many, many years. So I want to hand it over to Mary Walter for her intro.
All righty. So I am probably piggybacking on what Troy said. I went to Center in the 70s, and all the rumors you heard are absolutely true about what happened in the 70s. And my father, I'm from Kentucky, my father sent me to Center and said, get a liberal arts degree so you can talk at cocktail parties and find a husband. That was my objective at the time. Didn't work out, but anyway. So I didn't know I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I really partied for 4 years. I floundered. I was an exchange student my senior year, and it wasn't required at the time. So I was one of the few students who was lucky enough to do that. I majored in history because I loved the professors, Dr. Lee, Dr. Ham, and I loved doing research papers. So when I got out of center, I went from job to job. I was in radio in Lexington, wasn't very good at it. My parents sent me to secretarial school in New York City, which was, ugh. But I did work in advertising, which is cool, but I wasn't very good at it. I moved back to DC. I worked in government contracting. I worked for CPA firms. I moved to Savannah. I moved to Houston. It took until the mid 80s for me to fall into recruiting at MD Anderson Cancer Center and go, oh, okay, I really like this. And so, I kept failing, but I kept learning. And so it was that I really fell into that job, but it turned out that I really liked the being around people. I liked the start to finish. You had a little task you had to do and you finished it and you moved on. And at the time, you were supposed to stay with an organization for 100 years. Otherwise, you were looked at as flawed. Now, of course, that's different. But it ended up that because of doing that recruiting, I came back to the DC area, got my master's at GW. They had a brand new program called Human Resources Development, and it was more theoretical. And my husband at the time was a consultant with Accenture, and everything he kept talking about was so interesting, although he was in a different field. So when I got out of grad school, my daughter was young, and I just started my own practice, just started it, and actually landed my first project with GW and Howard, and did that for 12 years, then went back into corporate. Got lots of great experience, including global, which piggybacked onto the fact that I was an exchange student. And so I stayed in corporate for about 10 years and then went back out on my own a couple of years ago. And Brighter Strategies is actually a very small OD HR consulting firm. So we're practically on our own, but I totally agree with what Troy says. If you're not sure what you want to do when you're at center, it's okay. Try stuff, learn, fail. Everything you do will help you better understand what you don't like to do and what you do like to do. And I do laugh at my father's advice about learning how to talk at cocktail parties and finding a husband, but that's kind of the way it was in the 70s. But I think it's finding your passion. When I started recruiting for Anderson, it was a wonderful place, first of all, and I loved it. And I felt like I was doing something to help others. And because I was recruiting nurses, so that I still have that passion. I do more than recruiting now. I do a lot of project work, but it's finding your passion. And if you don't have it right away, it's okay. Just keep trying stuff, and you'll get there. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you all. I have a question before we open it up to student questions. Could you each kind of give a short bit of advice of something that you think is invaluable at center that students should take advantage of, that would make them successful in a career in consulting or find jobs in consulting? And maybe something that you wish you would have done, maybe in that, if you have any of those, like, kind of the positive and the negative of that question.
I'll go first. I'll say center instills in you the responsibility to go above and beyond just kind of the norm. With the small sample sizes or class sizes and the professor really challenging you, you can't really coast by. So I think the biggest advice I give to you for finding any job, but I guess particularly in consulting too, is just being proactive. And I think the fact that you're on this call, listening to this signals to me that you are taking the initiative, because the opportunities are out there. You just kind of have to go for it and get a bit of luck too. And the other thing I would say is, this is going to be my negative, but I also think it's positive. Center's not easy. I remember one of my first math tests, I got like a 75 on and was like, I'm going to flunk out. But it teaches you to kind of overcome that adversity. And as Mary Walter was saying, you're going to fail along the way. But I've found that I've learned the absolute most when I do fail, both professionally and outside of work as well. So.
Yeah, I think I'll add on to that then. One of my experiences, I don't know, it's like a Monday night, 7 o'clock at night. I get a phone call from one of the partners at PwC. He asked me, what do you know about forklifts? I know nothing about forklifts. It's like, okay, what do you know about leasing? I worked in a bank, but I never did leasing. I finance, but no leasing. It's like, okay, well, you are now the firm's forklift leasing expert. I need you on a plane tomorrow morning. Be down here in LA. We're meeting with a client. We have to sell yourself, and then you're going to work on this project. Awesome. So I'm packing my bag with one hand. I'm Googling forklifts and leasing and trying to teach myself and print out everything I could so I could read on the plane the next morning. And for the next 9 months, I was the firm's forklift leasing expert, and we did a really great project there. But don't be afraid to jump into something you know nothing about, because if you're in a consulting practice, particularly a large consulting practice, you're going to get thrown in the deep end, and you just got to start swimming and start figuring it out, and that's okay. And you kind of learn over the years how to develop the skill of not looking like you're paddling, but you're actually under the water. You're just reaching for everything.
Yeah,
exactly, just anything, and reading about forklifts at night and whatever it might be. So that skill of knowing how to react and act in a situation where you're really not that comfortable, but you're going to be thrown in, and then present yourself as a calm, collected expert in a field. And there's practices and tricks you can do along the way, but as you can practice that at center, don't be afraid to jump into something that it's okay not to be the expert. And it's okay to take a while to build up that expertise and knowledge while you're actually, running down the field at the same time. So that was one of my fun little stories in my PwC days.
that's great, Troy, because I was going to say, as a consultant, we have a broad knowledge base, but we don't have all the answers. And it's okay to say to a client, I don't know the answer to that, but I will go get it for you. And then you come back and get it. So that's very interesting. Okay, so my thing at Center, because I did admit that I was a terrible student and I wasn't focused, but being an exchange student, which wasn't required at the time, really started my love for global things. And I stayed in touch. I still visit the family that I lived with in Munich. And so that experience actually, whenever somebody would say, do you have any global experience? And I go, well, I lived over there, which is really great. I wish that I had, as much as I love history, I wish I'd gotten like a business degree, kind of a broad degree. And I will tell you, because my grades were so terrible, those bad grades followed me for many years. And so it kept me from getting in grad school for a couple of years, which turned out to be okay. So that's the other thing I would say to you is, there are reasons that things happen. And because I couldn't get into grad school early on, it was all right, because it took me 18 years to finally decide what I want to do and go to grad school. So, but that was totally me not being self-directed very well, not being driven, which I in turn completely did a 180, and I'm obnoxiously driven now. But so anything you learn at Center, all the experiences, all the professors, all the people, it's, and stay in touch with the president. I actually represented Center a couple of years ago at a university up in Philly, because it was the cute president who just resigned. Anyway, he couldn't make it. So stay in touch with Center when you leave. There's so many opportunities.
Awesome. Excuse me. I want to open it up to questions from students. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions you might have, or put it in the chat if you prefer that. Don't be shy.
I had a question. So this was touched on before about how you're going to learn the technical skills, like in the consulting field. You obviously won't have that right away, especially for us because we're so young and aren't experts. So what would be your advice for like softer skills that consulting firms look for? Like personal, I guess, skills.
Yeah, I guess from my experience, problem solving, and that's, in many cases, when you go to the larger firms, they'll run you through these little exercises of little case studies. Here's information. What would you do? How would you address it? So, the softer skills of solving problems, and being inquisitive. And that's kind of one of the tricks when you become the forklift leasing expert of your firm, and you go in there, is like, don't talk about forklifts on day one. You interview them, start documenting things back to them. I document your process and I give it back to you. And it's a way for me to learn and to affirm that I am listening to you and I'm hearing what you're doing. So these little tricks, that you can use to ease your way in, and you're not, you're providing value pretty quickly, which is their expectation, because they're, they tend to pay a lot of money for this service. But you do it in a way that you're learning as well, and you're getting the information that you need to be able to start providing some of that guidance and some of that advice. So, a lot of, problem solving skills. So that's something they're going to be looking for. Project management skills, just the art and practice of taking a problem, coming up with a plan by which you'll address it, executing that plan, and delivering a result. And you can do that anywhere. I mean, you can do that in designing a social event for your fraternity or sorority, being a part of a group. I think I was part of the Economic Society when I was there, and we had, work that we did as part of that. So almost everything's a project, and just, taking what was the problem, how did you address it? Here's how we planned it in the, digestible chunks, and here's how we executed it. That's something they're going to look for, because that's something you'll be doing every day as a consultant. So those would be some of the areas that, at least from my experience in the work that I do, comes in very handy.
Yeah, I think I would say for mine would be attention to detail. No matter what field you go in, that's going to be a valuable skill to have, but potentially in consulting. And when we're actually interviewing new hires, we'll give them tests kind of to try to gauge how attentive to detail they are. Because as an analyst, we're not just going to throw you to the wolves and have you walk into the boardroom and meet with the board directors of the company and present. You'll be doing the analysis, kind of the behind the scenes stuff. So your ability to be very attentive and catch things and really be a reliable analyst to make sure whatever analysis we're doing or whatever we're putting together is the highest of quality. I think that kind of goes along with your personal brand. If you can establish yourself and take pride in your work quality, then that will go a long way as well.
I was going to say, make sure you learn things like Excel and PowerPoint, and they come so easily to you that you don't have to worry about that, because you use those software packages, platforms all the time. And so go ahead and learn them and be comfortable. You don't have to be experts at them, but be comfortable with them. And, to Pete's point about being detail oriented, I am not. I'm a big picture person, and I fortunately have surrounded myself with people who are detail oriented, because that's not my strength. And but you need both. You need being detail oriented, and you need to be able to step back and look at the big picture both.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for those responses. My question is a little bit more general. So I know that within consulting, there's so many different types, and I'm particularly interested in possibly pursuing like environmental consulting.
Cool.
And I'm wondering if you guys know anything about that type of consulting, or just in general, like when it comes to like physical consulting versus, I'm gonna keep bringing, but like physical consulting versus like human resources, so dealing more with like risk and compliance and things like that versus what you guys do? If you can speak to that a little bit.
I can jump in. I think the cool thing is there are consultants in every single functional area all over the globe. And so one of the ways you get into consulting is by being an expert in some field. So if physical sciences, environmental, that's your thing, then learn everything you can about it, because that's where consulting firms look. I think, now I've never been with the big ones like Troy and Pete are, but I do think they look for people who do have that background and then who want to go into consulting. But Pete and Troy are the experts there.
Yeah, and think about, environmental, you think about large nonprofits, but also, one of my clients is the Gap, Gap Inc. right down the street here in San Francisco. They're global and their vendors and meals are in, India, China, Korea. And, one of the areas they've been focused on is sustainability. So, in corporate America, particularly in retail and, those producing fashion or physical product, sustainability has become a much bigger topic that they're spending time, effort, and money on. So think about that element of environmental as well, because it opens up a whole nother avenue and broadens your opportunities when you add sustainability as a functional subject area. So take some time, take some look into that. And that may be some more opportunities there, because the big consulting firms will focus there as well.
We just have 2 more minutes, so we have enough time for one more question. If anybody has a burning question out there. If not, then maybe each of you could just take, a minute to kind of give some last thoughts or advice that you might have. Oh, wait, Adonis has one, so you don't get to give your advice.
This is more so for Pete, since he graduated a little bit more recently. But, just coming into the workforce and being one of the youngest people in the office, like especially within the last 10 years or so, that's become like a big thing about ageism and people being respectful of like experience and experiences. And I'm wondering, what's that been like for you to navigate being a younger person at a bigger firm?
Yeah, it's interesting because when I was hired out of school, I was like the only analyst that was a new hire straight out of college. Some bigger companies will hire in classes where, there's 50 people that were just hired. So it's been interesting. I think it's beneficial both ways. I have a wealth of resources to learn from. But it's also, on the flip side, it's been beneficial for me to the company because I can kind of bring in a flux of new ideas. COVID has kind of thrown a wrinkle into all of this because I was working from home for the last 9 months. I've just recently gotten to be able to go back into the office on a limited basis. So the technology, Zoom, we had Zoom prior to this, but hardly ever used it. It's been interesting trying to learn all of this, but yeah, I don't know. It's been a learning experience for sure. And I think we'll continue to kind of see that evolve as kind of your old generation becomes the next main part of the workforce.
Yeah, one thing I might add to that as well is, even though your contribution to the team may not be deep subject matter expertise, you do have something to contribute. Find that and be good at it. And that may be, Excel spreadsheets and analysis. It may be building the PowerPoint decks. It may be something that isn't extremely exciting, but find a way to add value. And as you're adding your value, you're going to be learning from those next to you. Because in a lot of consulting practices, when I was doing bigger projects, we live in a war room. We reserve a big conference room, all the consultants sit around the table, and we live there for X number of months. And you learn so much, because when anything comes up, you're just like, hey, does anybody know how to? Oh yeah, you just do this. And boom, we just, you're always learning from each other. So contribute what you can. to have that seat at the table. And while you're at that table, you're going to be learning from everyone else around it and absorbing. So,
yeah, the last thing I would say is always look to see, okay, what else can I do? What can I do to kind of take the next step? Someone once told me, the fastest way or best way to get promoted through the organization is to say, how can I make the person above me's job easier? If I can prove that I can take on some of their responsibility, I'm proving that I'm ready to move to that next level. So that's not necessarily an age thing. That's more of just a seniority within the organization type thing. But I've always tried to keep that in the back of my mind to say, okay, I've done this, but is there something else I can do to take something off the plate of my boss?
Yeah. And I think if you have a good attitude, you make sure you've got the most fabulous attitude in the office and you volunteer for as much as you can, and people won't care about your age, whether you're older or younger. Just be a go-getter and, be a team player. And that goes a long, long way.
Thank you all. I think we'll leave at that. I think that's really good parting advice, even if it isn't what you planned on saying. So I do want to put a quick pitch in for the students and the alumni here in case you're not part of the Career Mentor Network, but we do have a Career Mentor Network with Center Alumni, and I'm going to put the link in the chat to everyone. If you're not part of that as a student or an alum, we'd love for you to become part of that. It is a space for students to connect with alumni, doing the things that they're interested in or interested in helping network or things like that. And frankly, you'd be able to network with other students. Alumni can network with alumni. Right now, I think we're in the 600s of students and alumni in that group. And it's a space to find people to give you advice or to connect with down the road. And I think that's really, really valuable going down the road. And our alumni are amazing people and always willing to help, as evidenced by this mini career chats that we're having. We have 33 of these sessions and 74 alumni participating in 2 days, which is amazing. So I want to leave it at that. Thank you, everybody, for all of your time. And I think if you want to get in touch with any of the alumni here, feel free to reach out to me directly, and I have their contact information. I'll send it on to you. And thank you all.
Yeah. Bye. Nice to meet you
Yeah,
all.
all right.
Join us today.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Mindy.
Of course. Thank you, guys.
Bye.